So today's conversation is going to be about three things that we want to bring to our attention. We will be talking about leadership and parenting as a form of leadership. And we want to bring this conversation to three components. There is an I in every relationship. It always starts with I. This is what we can do. This is what we control. And this is the only thing we control very often. Then there is a them place, the place to whom we connect. Whether this is the young person in your team, whether this is your teenage son and daughter, there's also a component of we, because the interactions between the two parties always require attention. It requires investment in time, in energy. And thank you, Firuza. We see you. Welcome, everyone. If you can please put where you're coming from, that will be fantastic, so we can understand the dimensions and cultural components in the audience today. But most importantly, in the intersection of all our collaboration and components of relationship, there is an element of leadership. And we'll be diving into this because we're so familiar with so many business concepts that are structured and easy for us to understand because we learn them as adults. And then we do not necessarily apply them to the life and relationship in home, which often are kind of rooted in a very deep familial systems. So we want to bring this leverage because the main concept through all the conversations we always have is that there is no separation. There is no work and life that you need to balance. There is no parent and kid that need to be looked at separately. We are one, we experience in dimensions of life, and we continuously bring it together how to leverage different strengths in our lives, whether we look at them this way or not, and make them a powerful tools that help you lift up some other elements in your life. Thank you so much for everyone who is jumping in. Great to see people from Colombia and Virginia. Really appreciate your collaborating with us and having these conversations with us. So Deepak, I would like you to jump in and introduce yourself because you're an absolutely amazing coach. Deepak works with children that we consider to be children, but they're young adults, so growing into that place in the transitional moment of their life between ages 14 and 22, just when they make probably one of the most important decisions that really put them on the trajectory of life. He's also a father. He is also a former C-suite manager, so he has a broad perspective on various aspects of life. So I'd like you to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background why you decided to move from corporate America into coaching.
Absolutely, I appreciate that, Olga. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here and be able to share some time with you. So yeah, my career was about 15 years in corporate. At the end of my career, I was driving continuous improvement across an $850 million organization with 40 locations across the United States. And really from there, you know, I learned about business, but I also learned about people. I learned about communication. I learned about leadership. And from there, you know, coming from the first generation immigrants that actually came from India a year before I was born, I had my own challenges coming through my own childhood without having the support because my parents were so focused on their work because ultimately they needed to provide for their children that I was kind of left off on my own. And left off on my own, I really struggled through my teenage, my college years, where I spent 7 years. And, you know, it took me down some twists and turns that I survived and was miraculous, I believe, for surviving, you know, at the worst. You know, I tried to take my own life, you know, in my mid-20s, right at the tail end of me coming out of college. And obviously I didn't succeed. I'm here with you guys today, but now, as Olga mentioned, I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. And as I got to a point in my career, I just recognized that something had to be done about what we're doing for our youth today, because the gaps that were there 20 years ago when I was in that place are still there today. And so that's really why I take the stand that I do each day with what I do at Volition Academy to support teenagers and young adults to be able to help them be able to create the life that they want to live, their extraordinary life or their version of it.
Fantastic. And I know the price that we pay for the burnout for this go culture that we are in is tremendous. And my own story brought me to the same place because I'm a mother of 5 children. And as we all do, we keep working and we keep working. And then it took me almost the death of my 5th baby, who came early, because of complete and total burnouts, that I allowed myself and everyone around allowed myself to be totally captivated with. And so it took us about 2 years of neurology, neuroscience, like all sorts of work on my son to bring him back to normal. And when we finally did, and it was a big moment of celebration that we finally were considered to be fine, normal, it was a biggest hit in my system. What is normal? Normal is what put us in this hell on the first place, that cost us over $200,000 in bills, daily activities with different type of doctors, me putting myself in 5 days of coma, him being resuscitated twice. And that's where I decided, just like Deepak and so many of us, that this is just not a normal way. There is a different way. And just like 100 years ago, no one flossed their teeth and it was a normal then. Now it's not. The mental wellness, the different way of leadership, the different way of structuring our life is a new normal that we want to be in this conversation and beyond, and inspire you to think about different things from that perspective. So with that, let me jump into our conversation. We are going to be talking about leadership, because leader is who you are for anyone who you touch and inspire. And it takes really not the task to be done focus, but to people to grow into what they can become. The leader is every single person who has someone who look up to you, who is following you. And so that's the first perspective. When we show up in our relationships with self, whether it's with our kids, whether this is with our teams, whether it's in our community, it's the vision that we hold for people. It's a vision we hold for the future. And it's opportunities we create for them, including ourselves. So it's not a label. It's not a manager. It's not the person who knows it all and can show everything to everyone. It's not about you. And it's not about accidental things. We're not born being parents. We're not born being leaders. But there is a way to recognize that you're becoming that person, and intelligently and creatively design, just like we do business plans. We can design our life. We can design life for our kids. We can design our relationship. We can design our leadership. So we will be looking a little bit into that to get an idea what vision of people we can have and model to children or people who look up to us, how we grow and how we help them to grow. It's all about the people that we're trying to manage and how to understand them. And then parenting is a form of leadership, probably the most important leadership that we can think of. And self-parenting is a way to your own growth as well as to the growth of people that look up to you. And we'll be talking about this a little bit as well. So where do we start? We always start with I. I is the most important piece of any puzzle. It's inspiration, it's impact, it's innovation, it's information. But the most important thing, I is the only thing we can control. There's no way you can control anyone else. You can't control people who like you, don't like you, hire you, marry you, divorce you. You always can control how you relate to this situation. That's where the conversation about parenting starts with understanding I, myself, right? As a parent, as a leader. I would like you to bring these 3 dichotomies of leadership just to park 3 containers that I think are very, very important to understand. And then we're going to translate this into parenting as well. So the first concept is that there is a present. We always manage the present. And there is a future that we need to also simultaneously prepare ourselves for. And that's the big dilemma of how to manage, do things now short term, and keep an eye on what needs to be growing and developing and structuring so the future that we envision can realize itself. So we need to have this balance of both present and long-term future. And that's important when we talk about kids, because we know they will grow, but this investment is hard to see. The second dichotomy is how we see who we manage, who we lead. It's always about others. But the very important component is how you lead yourself. And again, self is the place we often misconceive, and we don't have the plan for this duality of this balance of self and others. And obviously, we need to also see the plan for them to grow further. And the third one is about having these dynamics between managing and leading, because managing is task and things need to be happening, while leading is people and what we need to influence them. So before Deepak takes us into this road of parenting, I would like us to have a concept that no one is born as leaders or parents or successful anything. We're all born, and then we go and we grow through a journey. And I want us to understand the 5 phases of leadership so we can then translate this into where we stand, what we have, what we need to plan, and where we might learn some new perspectives. The first one is expert. When you get a job, you are a great economist, you're a great lawyer, whatever you might be, and all the thing that you focus attention is on completing tasks, do this well, manage self, be in control. Control is incredibly important for our psychology. We love to be in control, and we're very uncomfortable when we fall out of control and deal with uncertainties, VUCA, the vulnerability and uncertainties and complexity. But then we start moving again on the line of leading. We get assigned to lead a couple people, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's when we start having less of the task and people management components, very important, because there is a whole level skills that need to start developing simultaneously. How to delegate instead of do it all myself, how to support them instead of doing this for them, how to coach them instead of teaching and advising them, and managing expectations because they are learning, they're not doing the same things as you do, but having this idea of how we relate to patients, right, of expectations and standards. And we start to learn the influence because control is not possible when we deal with other people. We grow in the next level of leadership when now we have bigger teams. Now we even less attention on task. There's much more presence on people. But we also usually be squeezed at that time between needing to do this and pleasing the leadership and handling the demands on us. We're sandwiched between. And in life, we sandwich between older parents that we need to take care of and younger kids and managerial positions and paying for the mortgage. So there is a moment where soft skills, the mindset, the communication skills, the resilience skills, the compassion to yourself becomes incredibly important, and staying in the control, out of control, but still having influence. And then we move to the next level of function leader, whether you're marketing department, whether you're in budgeting department, we now start doing the bigger functions. And bigger functions require politics and negotiations, collaborations, looking for win-win-win communication patterns. And it requires trust. Big deal, because now we have to delegate things and tasks are no longer in our place. And finally, we get to the big leadership place where we really need to have a vision, the strategy, the people, the politics, and then focus on them growing and learning and less of us controlling pieces. That's where trust, influence, and learning to accept and adapt comes in place. So if we take this to the parents' journey, we will see very similar patterns. And now I want you to pay really attention to notice where your strategies get stuck. Sometimes they get stuck at a very young age, even though you're dealing with a 15-year-old. So pay attention to where you are and whether or not you have ideas how to move to the next stage in your relationship with your kids. Small kids, you do it all. You wipe their butt, you cook, you feed them, you wash them, you put socks on them. That's obviously you're an expert and you're the only one, right? But then we start moving into like elementary school when they start actually learning to do things. Plus, we start getting childcare, nannies, grandparents, teachers, peers, mothers, and we often miss this moment that now we are not alone, we have the team, and we're still not realizing that. The kids become in our team too. They have ability to put socks on, put their pants away, but we often miss that moment as well. Then we move into the middle school where kids get even more abilities and they have more peers, and now it's bigger team that they deal with. We often miss that opportunity. When they get to the high level school, that's when they can get up themselves. They can wake up by themselves. They can register for classes on their own. But we like them to be in our control often. What we don't do usually, and I have been guilty of that myself, even though I raised kids up to like 25 years of age, we don't talk about important things of functions like budgets, like relationship, which is a big deal for them, but we kind of assume that they should know it, just like someone assumed that we should know them. That's the conversation when the functional management becomes really, really interesting for ourselves. And then finally, we get to the place of forever. And we're all kids to someone, it doesn't matter. You could be a 50-year-old baby to your mom. But the place of vision, strategy, and relationships versus managing and telling them what to do. This is the place we will all probably experience in this commotion. And so I would invite you to kind of think of this perspective, recognizing where you are and where you kind of stuck. So if you can put in a chat, that will be fantastic. Which state of this journey you feel you are, and which state of the journey you feel you should be moving towards. So we get this reflection a little bit.
Well, and one thing, Olga, if I could comment, I guess if you can jump back on that slide, but like it's interesting that middle point, the 11 to 14 and the soft skills. And I know we were talking about this, that because they're called soft skills, right? We kind of like diminish the value of them, but that's really where one of the biggest gaps, probably the biggest gap, is for the teenagers and young adults that I work with. It's because ultimately they don't understand the mindset, the communication, the resilience, which are really these critical aspects with their mindset that would allow them to move through these moments of transition. And the other thing that you mentioned, as far as just stopping to do things, to understand what they can do versus you can do. And there's a term called learned helplessness that I see a lot of, where teenagers things have been done for them for so long that they don't understand how to do them, even though they're simple things like use a washing machine, because their clothes have always been done for them. They're afraid of actually doing that thing because they don't know how to do it. They're worried they're going to ruin their clothes because they don't know how to do things. And even the simplest things, if they're done for you, they start to put up walls and they create that learned helplessness. So it's such an important thing to understand when we have to relinquish control and start to hand things over.
Fantastic. And so I think maybe we can get a little bit deeper into reflections. Deepak, if you want to take us on this little journey of self-reflection.
Absolutely. And so, as Olga was talking about, we start off into control in our in our leadership journey, and then we move into influence, which is really where we have to end up, is within influence. But within influence, we have to have a relationship, right? Whether we're a manager or whether we're a parent, we have to have the relationship. And so what I want you to do is just spend some time with asking yourself these questions and rating yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 to be able to see where you're really at. And so the first question is, is my teen open to sharing personal secrets with me? And rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. Are they, is that not at all? Or is that, you completely agree that they do want to share secrets with you? And
we'll appreciate if you can put it in the chat, because it will let us kind of see where the problems might be, so we can address something more and less. So if you can just put in the chat, it's totally private. No one is going to be seeing the chat. We will share the screen. That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. And when you answer that question, what it really means is then, does your teen feel like they have a safe space in your relationship to be vulnerable? And that's so important, especially in this time of transition that they're in. And really in teen years, everything's a transition, right? Between school, between thinking about the future, whatever they're doing in their own physical transformation, having a place to be able to speak openly is so important for them, so they can process their feelings. The second question is, is my teen spending close personal time with me often? And again, just rate yourself 1 to 10. How often are they spending close personal time with me? And that just talks to you about what kind of connection you really have at this moment. And connection is very important in relationship. I think we all understand that. The next question, my teen feels seen and heard at home, right? And again, rate yourself 1 to 10. And usually it's just a quick rating. When we think about things too long, we end up overthinking it. We end up talking ourselves into a different answer. But instinctually, we know really what the true answer is. But if they feel seen and heard at home, that means that they feel understood. They feel like they're heard, and that's so important as well. And then number 4, my teen strives for progress academically, athletically, in whatever they're doing, to be acknowledged. And that just basically speaks into them feeling significant. in that space at home, which is again very important, and that also kind of gets them to start to understand the confidence that they have within themselves as they strive for those things, because they build confidence, and we'll talk about confidence in just a little bit. And then the last thing is my teen respects my wishes and obeys my rules, right? And this is where I hear most from the parents I speak to before I start working with their child. But this question is, leading to, does my teen allow me to parent? Do they accept the parenting relationship? And that's true with a manager, that's true with a parent, whether or not you can manage or you can lead as a parent or a manager, someone has to allow you that. And that's part of the relationship, right? We can't have someone listen to us and actually heed our warnings or take our wisdom without actually having a relationship. And this is why it's very difficult for step parents to step into parenting without having that relationship, and not creating that relationship and just immediately expecting to be listened to, for rules to be obeyed, because the relationship has to be earned. And so it's really important that you understand, where is your relationship, because without having a relationship, everything else becomes impossible almost. It becomes very difficult for you to be able to move your teenager, to move your child, to where they need to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
In order to be a leader, you have to have followers. First of all.
Absolutely.
And so that's a great segue into talking about now them. We looked a little bit into us. Now let's take a great kind of scan, decoding of what they experience, why they experience, and then we'll come back to us again, finding this teenager within us as well. So Deepak, if you can just take us through this phenomenal map of people.
Absolutely. So, what I find with the hundreds of teenagers that I've worked with is that there's really three types of teenagers. And the easiest way to be able to measure where they're at is by their grades. And so, what I've come to find is there's the I'm done student, and this is like the John Bender in the Breakfast Club, if we all remember the Breakfast Club from the 80s. But the core thought that this type of individual has in their teen years is that life's not working out for me. And usually it's because of some sort of past circumstances that they've had with their family. Maybe their parents have gotten divorced. Maybe there was a loss of a grandparent that they were close to. It could be something at school where they're being bullied, or they're just not understanding something that's going on in one of their classes. Maybe it's they don't have the close friends they want. Maybe they've had to go through moving with the family. Usually what we would call in the adult world a life-changing event, right? There's some sort of life-changing event that they've gone through it, and it's begun to kind of discourage their action that they're taking. And so it's actually moving them to a point of inaction. And they usually feel trapped in wherever they are, and they secretly wish there was another way for them to be, because they're typically procrastinating mostly everything that they're doing, because they're not really doing much at all. And their self-doubt is draining their energy to move themselves forward, because they don't actually believe that they can change their circumstances. So that's the I'm done student. And then we find ourselves with the average student. And this I compare to kind of a Ferris Bueller. And I think most of us remember Ferris Bueller from the 80s. But you could see that he had so much potential, but he was kind of operating with average grades. And the core thought that this type of student has is that things are good enough, right? This is fine. And so what they tend to do is they begin to settle in areas of their life, and their excitement for life is pretty much low, because they don't have anything that they're looking to optimistically into their future. So then they might seem lazy. And I hear this a lot from parents, that they think that their child is lazy, but it's not necessarily that they're lazy. It's because there's underlying reasons. And we're going to talk about that here in just another second as well. But this type of student, they're actually disorganized. They're not really focused on their future or planning for their future. They're secretly frustrated with where they are, because they know that they're capable of so much more, but they don't know how to get out of their own way as well. And so they struggle with stress and anxiety, because they're afraid that they're not going to be able to make the big dreams that they want come true for their life. And so they tend to procrastinate as well, and they have self-doubt too that's draining their energy, just like the I'm done student. And then the last one is the overachiever student. And the overachiever student, they have high grades, they have high GPA, and their core thought is just one more week, one more month of the stress that I'm in, and I'll get there. And their academics, they're usually a huge driver of their success, but they're also a driver of their stress and their anxiety, because they believe when they get to their next report card, they complete this next paper, this project, this task, whatever it is, that they're going to finally relax, but instead they keep pushing and it never stops. So, they're exhausted and they seem to be headed toward burnout at this really young age. So they're constantly overwhelmed and then they can't find a way out of that. So it's the high achiever. The other thing that really is concerning is their social life is usually impacted because they're keeping themselves so focused in their academics. And they're keeping themselves in their academics usually because there's something that they're feeling as far as lack within themselves. And because they're feeling that lack, they're using their grades to kind of prove things that they're not able to feel within. So it's almost to get that recognition, to fill a void that they're trying to figure out how to find out what it is, and they're using the grades for that. And so that's really it. Now, those are the three types. Now, when we look at that, and then we look at really where most kids are at today. I have some stats here, and I'm just going to quickly go through them. But almost half of the kids out there don't understand what is going to need to happen for them to be prepared for college. They feel like they've missed out on something, and what that leads to is then almost half are dropping out of college, and this is across the United States here. That we're basically getting a very large dropout rate. And if you could flip to the next slide there, Olga, for me. Then what that leads to, because what's really important is how are they feeling socially and emotionally? Well, overwhelmingly, more than half feel overwhelming anxiety. And then on top of that, a little bit over half felt like things are hopeless. And then if you look at what that leads to with substance abuse, which when you get to college campuses, and this was my story as well, that's the only method that you have to cope with the situation that you're going through, the stress and the anxiety that you're experiencing. And so 40% are regularly using substances. And this is binge drinking. And binge drinking, they've proven that just one heavy night of drinking actually impacts your mental cognition for over a month. So you can imagine what that does to their grades. And then ultimately at the end of this, where 12% are seriously considering suicide, which was my story. This is really where I was, where I didn't feel prepared, and then it catapulted me through basically all of these statistics, feeling hopeless, feeling anxiety, leading to substance abuse, and then ultimately the end, which none of us want to think about our parent or as a parent that our child or our children are actually going to ever think about doing. So that really is what we're trying to work through by really understanding where are they at. And so if you could flip to the next slide, Olga.
And I just want to comment, Deepak, because we look at this from the college statistics, children's statistics. But if we were to overlap the statistics we get on average workforce, us, adults, we will find very similar numbers. And that's what we see right now, this big grades recession, like when people leave in the job because they also lost. They don't want to do this, it's too toxic, but they don't have clarity, they don't have the vision. And we basically experience in the same teen kind of frustration very often through the end of our life, living life of regret in the end. So when we talk about this, keep reflecting, because you will see the same in pretty much anyone who is trying to find their way in life.
Absolutely. And I think it even goes back to the three different individuals, the I'm done. Even as an adult, if you go through a life-changing event with a loss in the family, it has the ability to really throw you off your base, off of your foundation, and then put you into that place where you almost start to give up on life. So absolutely, it all relates. And especially if those things aren't worked through as a teenager, then they carry with us into our adult years. So then this becomes the mind of an I'm done teen. And really what happens is our beliefs that we have, that we've created based on our past experiences, they will start to manifest their way into how we think. And those thoughts then will follow their way into our feelings, right? We have a thought, it fires a neurotransmitter, which then makes us feel something. And that feeling could be good or bad. But ultimately then how we feel is going to drive us to action. And, if you're happy, we typically take action, right? When we're sad, we're hiding under the blanket, waiting for the next day to come. And this is where most teenagers are at when they believe things like, I'm socially awkward, I don't take tests well, I'm not college material, I'm going to be left behind. All of those type of beliefs that they have, that they're unresolved, that they don't understand how to process, leads into these thoughts about it's hard to make friends and why bother studying. And then these lead to these feelings of being anxious, being depressed, or being sad, just like we saw in the social and the emotional statistics. And from there, basically, it leads to these actions, right? Where they're not taking any action, where they're studying very minimally, where they're not completing their college applications, where they're hiding in their bedroom alone. And what tends to be is I have conversations with parents is that they say that, oh, because my child isn't filling out college applications, they're not ready to take on the responsibility. And that's a very quick and easy correlation to make, right? Or my child is lazy because they're not doing this, so they're not ready for their next steps in their future. But that's not necessarily it. There's so many different layers and levels that have to be looked at to really understand what's going on, rather than create these quick narratives that my child is lazy, they're not ready, or whatever that is. So I want you to really always think about, whatever is happening with your teenager or with your child, is why is this happening? What could be going on here? And then the relationship that you have is going to allow you to be able to really explore that, as long as they feel like they're connected, and they can share their vulnerabilities in that safe space.
What I hear, Deepak, is that stopping, slowing down, and taking time to sit down and be with the experiences we have is extremely important. We are so busy doing, fixing. But you can't fix yourself out of this systemic issue if you don't see the system. So what this allows us is, again, yes, talk about kids, but you can talk about your employees. You can see the action is probably the most visible component. We see them procrastinating, indecisiveness, perfectionism. It's a form of avoiding to do the thing because everyone knows it's never going to be perfect. So as long as I'm trying to be perfect, I don't have to do it. All sorts of things that we often associate with our identity actually are these actions or inactions, which is even more important. And then we have the feelings. We talk about conflicts, we're talking about depressed, we're talking about combustible people, but it's not necessarily the person, it's the experiences that we emotionally carry within. So we might see this on the surface without really going deeper into this iceberg that is hidden from us. So this wonderful presentation allows you literally to have those columns to start noticing what you have, or your children have, or your employees have, or you yourself feel, and then see where the gaps are, because that is allowing you to see the transparency of how you process life and where it's coming from. And beliefs are probably the most difficult to come up because they usually come from very deep boxes we're being put way back then when we were kids. And the interesting thing is that I'm going to take this experience back to you, and I'm asking you to do a mini tiny exercise. We have basically two ways of simply positioning yourself where you are in the high achiever matrix, right? So if you have high effort, you put lots of effort on the horizontal axis, and then we see the results going up, we can really put yourself into one of the four components. You're either not doing much and you're not achieving much, which probably not you. You wouldn't be here if it would have been you. But you can see this behavior somewhere. You can see this disengaged person in the workspace. You can see this disengaged siblings of yours or friend of yours. Then there is a person who is doing a lot, nonstop, move, do. They cannot stop, yet there's not really, it's like a squirrel that produces little results. I call them anxious underachiever. There's anxiety in that, there's frustration, there's lots of people pleasing, do this for them, and putting yourself last, but ultimately you're not doing the important things for yourself and you end up not progressing. This is where we have lots of management, middle management, where you do for everyone else. There's a huge to-do list, but if you look into what you do for yourself, there's almost nothing to develop your career, your personal growth, your health, your relationships. So notice where you are. And then there's overwhelmed, overachiever, people who put lots of effort and have huge results. That was me. Total burnout from time to time, which results into lots of marriages, lots of relationships, disconnect, drinking, because you can't stop, you don't give yourself permission, so you create permissions. We create diseases sometimes without knowing this subconsciously, so we can stop because we're not allowing ourselves to stop. So a bunch of you probably going to be falling into this category. That's usually where most of my clients are coming from. And then there's a person that we want to be, right? The person who is doing just the right things, strategically, based on the values, based on the strategy that they have and long-term vision of self, and achieving the results that are important for us. So notice where you are. I want you to really, really look at this and put yourself into this category just in relation to work, how you show up in work and life, because kids watch you. You are their role model. You can teach them to eat broccoli day in and day out, but you yourself don't do this, guess what? It's going to be exactly what you do. Like father, like son, the 4 elements that we have. Put in the chat, please, what you think you are. Are you unengaged, anxious underachiever, overwhelmed overachiever, or successful fulfilled person? It will help you to understand what they think is also how you mirror it to them. So looking for your responses in the chat, guys. Get active, start talking, because it's important to reflect. You need to understand where you stand, right?
Oh, sorry.
So Karina.
I was going to just say, like, the overwhelmed achiever, I was once promoted 7 times in 7 years, and I was pushing. And so I was definitely the overwhelmed achiever. I was full of anxiety, but I was really working as hard as I could to be able to create the success. But I never actually stopped to ever give myself the credit for the success that I was creating. And so I constantly felt like I didn't deserve it, even though I was creating such massive success. But even by that 6th, 7th year, I kind of felt like I shouldn't be here. And I felt like I was going to get fired every single day because I was moving so fast. I was learning so fast that I felt like that I wasn't enough. I wasn't capable enough to do my job, and all the not enoughness drove me to alcohol. It drove me to different ways to cope. And so it's amazing that you can create so much success, but not acknowledge yourself for it. And then while you're creating that success, you can still abuse yourself physically in so many ways because of all the anxiety and how you cope with it.
And it's not just you're abusing yourself, you're abusing your relationships, you're abusing your dreams, you're abusing inspirations and ultimately impact that you came here to do in this life. And kids are watching, and people that follow you, your employees, are watching. And if you say that you can take time off, but you yourself consistently demonstrating to them, like how you answering, I literally receive emails sometimes 3 a.m. What are you doing at 3 a.m. responding to emails, right?
Yeah.
How can they possibly be relaxed around you being their manager, their leader, their inspiration, if you cannot yourself carry on this value? And so what I would like us to really, really see now, that you can see the parallel between those 2 systems, right? It's exactly the same. This freeze, fight, flight, freeze response, which is a stress response that is chronic, very known, I guess, by now. You can see how this exactly translates into that system. We either freeze, we go into this, like, don't touch me. It's a 9-to-5 job. I'm just doing my job. Get me my next paycheck. It's very drifty, very sleepy place. That's depression. There is lots of disengagement, low motivation, no motivation, lots of depletion of energy. There is this flight when you're constantly doing things, but avoiding doing important things. The fight, yes, you achieve, and you get bruised. It's like boxing. My father was a boxer. And yes, you win, but you know what? You come with a broken nose every time yourself as well. And ultimately, the flow, when there is a vision, there's strategy, there's clarity, boundaries, things need to be clear for yourself. And that is what we ultimately want to create. So we don't create this for the kids that we experience on the right. And you can see how we exactly the same experience on the left. So why are we doing this? What's the big driver? And the biggest surprise is, and Deepak will walk us through this, but it's not you. It's these boxes around us that came up while we were growing up, right? There's a cultural and societal boxes, familial boxes that keep us stuck because we don't even know which peel of the onion is not ours. We never stop thinking about this. We never really know it. And we absolutely assume that this is the only way of being. So our invitation in coaching every time starts with, let's find you. Let's find you. Let's get you naked. Because it's not your clothes. Clothes can be put in the closet. You can buy another one. it's you who can put whatever clothes you want on if you decide. So let's talk about these cultural boxes, Deepak.
Absolutely. And to kick this off, I'd love to ask a question first, which is, what do you want for your children? What do you want for that teenager or that child that you have? If you guys could put that in the chat, I'd love to be able to see that. And I'll talk about that in a second, and I can continue in until we see what those results that come in are. But really think about that. What do you want for them? And so the first component to this that I always think is interesting is this idea that we tend to have these kids that we're looking at, and we think, how ungrateful is this child that they don't know what I do for them every day? And there's that entire thought of that we end up having, right, when we're really getting into our stuff. And the truth is that when we really look at it, we did not have that child for them, right? We chose to have that child because we knew it was going to enrich our lives, that it was going to be about our happiness, and their happiness was our happiness, right? And I see happiness coming in, right? For them to be happy in life. And so when we get to this point and we realize that we keep looking at them saying, I can't believe, I do so much for you and you should be grateful for me, when it was our choice to have them. It was our choice because of our happiness that we chose to bring them into this world. It shifts things a bit. And it's like this 2 millimeter distinction that you can have when you understand that really you did this for you, and that they are their own entity, but they were there because you chose them to be there for your own happiness. And just understanding that, just sit with that. And every time you start to feel like they're ungrateful because you do so much for them, you chose this, right? We all chose to have these children. And so we just have to really sit with that.
And we also have this perspective, our own perception, what they should be, because we created them, so they should be. We can mold them into this. And then they happen to be their own people, and suddenly it's uncomfortable because it's mismatching our vision of them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, because and I see a lot of happy and thriving, happy. It's happiness, right? And so I'll jump ahead here, but I mean, happiness is about happiness on their terms, right? It's not about what we think happiness is. It's about what they think happiness is. And that usually becomes this huge rift because we start prescribing our version of happiness to them. And then when they're inconsistent with our prescription, we're unhappy, but it's really about their happiness, right? And they're not our children, right? They don't belong to us. They came through us, and they are their own entity that get to decide their own life. And we tend to not see that. We tend to see them as our property, that they owe us something because we're doing so much for them, and all of these components that really start to make a mess of our relationship. And
then sometimes in this coaching, it's very important to also think, what if they came to teach you? What if you came to learn from them? And you will see how inspiring, how amazing they are. Like all the artwork behind me, this is inspiration of my kids. It's their kids' work. And it's not, they created not because it's beauty, but because each of them has a message of sleepless tigers who can wake up anytime. You can be powerful, you can be wise, right? They come to teach us what? Sit down and journal this for 20 minutes. You will be in tears. Your heart will open up. You will realize how the universe is working for you through them. And sometimes it's great to partner with them instead of trying to be on top and submit them into something that they need to be so you can be happy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I always say that, our relationships are really the mirror that you get to look at yourself through someone else to really help you grow and expand the most. So right on with that. The next one is good teams versus bad teams. And it kind of hits on a point that I made earlier, which is we tend to look at a behavior. We tend to say, that this is a bad kid, right? This kid is not doing his homework. This kid is not planning their future. This kid is, they're cutting school, whatever they're doing. But it's not about the thing that they're doing. It's about the thing behind the thing that they're doing. Why are they doing it? And until we start to understand that, and what I always say is there is no such thing as a bad kid. It's just about a situation that they're in, because we all have this natural inclination within us, every human being, to be good. And so the reason that we would not be is because there's something that just is unresolved that needs to get worked on. And without it being worked on, they're going to live in this place where they're trying to make it okay. And maybe that activity that they're using to make it okay by, procrastinating or neglecting or what have you is just the only mechanism of coping that they have at the moment. So just understanding that when you see your child doing something, that not to necessarily jump to this conclusion like they're out to get you, right? I think that's the immediate, conclusion that we get to. And even with my 4-year-old, sometimes this thought pops into my head like he is trying to upset me. He is trying to get under my skin. And it's not the case. It's just this thought that pops to our mind. And we have to recognize that it's not it. It's not about us. It's about what they need. And there's a reason behind the way that they're acting. And we just have to understand it rather than jumping to that first instinct that we have, which is typically wrong. The next one is, as a parent, we should automatically know what to do. And this is the thing, and Olga, I love your explanation earlier as far as people didn't floss 100 years ago. When we look at what's happened over the last 50 to 60 years, things have drastically changed. We're both parents are working, right? So the amount of time that we spend with our children is limited. We all, with the fast pace of our careers and the success that we all have, we move and we move from one community to the next. And so we used to be able to have two parents, or one parent at least, spending time with the child all day long. We used to have communities that supported our families. We used to not have this fast pace of change. And so because of this, we had these children supported in so many ways that they are not today. And because that doesn't exist, we're losing our values, we're using our culture, and our teenagers and our kids, they're orienting themselves in some way, right? And there's this this idea, right? When a duckling is hatched, you see them following the mother goose or the duck. And it's because they have to orient themselves with something that they can follow. And without having the ability to follow that consistency of a parent or a supporting multi-generational family or community that supports a teenager, they orient themselves to their peers. And they do that because that's the way that the society is today. And that's okay. But then we've got to support them in different ways, which I think most parents, they feel like they're losing their culture. They're losing, the values that their family had. And it's there because we're trying to parent and do things the same way as we did 50 years ago when the world has radically changed, when we've radically changed. And we've just got to grow with the times and really give them that support that they need.
But we're also not the only ones. There's so much more that happens in kids' life that you have a space that is yours as a parent, mostly to be responsible for having this constantly available source of support, trust, love, acceptance, not teaching necessarily, right? And recognizing the pie in their life from other sources, because each of these pie pieces teaching them something. And we all have a part, we all have parts, but we also need to sort of be able to step back and see what is the influences and why these influences are important to kids. Whether we agree or disagree with them, this is the reality of their life. The social media for them is like air, they breathe it. Absolutely. Even though we disapprove, we need to be able to step into their shoes and see it from their pie to get recognition and appreciation of what else can be done strategically around this.
Absolutely. And the next one here is their failure, our failure. And I think this is a lot, we all step into this as a parent, right? We see our child's grades and they're not doing well in their grades. And then we immediately think, well, what does this mean about me? And what does this mean about my parent? Am I a good parent because of what's happening here? And so this whole idea that what they do is what we do, and their performance means something about ours, especially in this world of overachievers that I think we all have here today, it's unacceptable, right? And it's because we immediately get triggered that this is going to mean something about us that we've been trying to hide and circumvent for decades at this point. And it's not the case, right? They're going to learn through the moments that they experience, and what you go through is what you grow through, right? The failure is something that they're going to learn from. And when we can disconnect from that, when we can disconnect from what it is that we expect for them, and just allow them to go through it by guiding them through it rather than connecting it to be their success and our success, or then we push them to do things that we lacked in our childhood, right? I've seen so many parents where they didn't, make it to the state championship as a child in football. So they're pushing their child to be the star football player so they can live through them. And that's, again, not letting them live their own authentic life, because we're trying to take the lack from our life and push it into theirs. We've got to be really conscious of that, of where it is that we wanted to have experiences that we didn't get to have, and how we're trying to push those onto our child without them actually wanting them. And then societal values versus family values versus personal values. And, this just goes into really understanding, like, what is being pushed at us, societally or culturally, that we're using that as far as the mold for what our children should be. If we look at what society and culture and magazines and everything show as far as what the image of a beautiful woman is, right? They're razor thin, super skinny, completely unhealthy, completely even something that you couldn't actually do physically without airbrushing, right? But then there's even some situations where there's mothers that when they see their child and she's in her teen years and she's maybe not necessarily skinny, but a little bit heavier than that, they see that as not necessarily beauty, and their definition of beauty, and then they try to manage that, right, by doing lower calorie meals or what have you. And it's this idea that we're pushing what we think is beauty onto them, rather than letting them be their authentic version of beauty the way that they are. Now, it's not about being unhealthy, but it's just about really understanding that we need to be clear on what's coming from within us and what is coming from the outside world that we're then projecting onto our children.
So basically, do need to live our gifts, and it will stay with us. It doesn't go anywhere else. Then Deepak students grew up, and then they become my clients because they show up at age 50 something, because they realize life is coming to the end and they never lived it. And then instead of being the musician they always wanted to be, they became the engineer, because that's what the family said is more important to become.
Mm-hmm.
But this misalignment, we call it midlife crisis, we call it whatever we want to call it, it catches back with you. And so it's better to start early, or Absolutely. At any moment you realize that you're flipping away from what you feel is aligned you, stop and start thinking, because it will never stop calling you, and it will create all sorts of gaps in our life, relationship, and feeling of self without being addressed.
Absolutely. I always say, like, if you're not really excited about what you're going to do every single day, really think about that, because what if you get to the end and then you realize that you lived your whole life wrong because you just played it safe? But like, there was no need for that, because it's just this one life, and you could have lived it in a completely different way, completely excited and enthralled with what you were doing. And really think about that now, because you don't want to get to the end and have that thought, because there's no do-overs. There's no going back, unless somehow someone creates a time machine, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen in our lifetime. So then it goes into your teen, right? So this is from a parenting side, but now on the teen side, and there's fixing symptoms versus root cause. And most teenagers, right, most adults, and Olga, I'm sure would agree with me here, they don't understand why they actually feel this way. What is my desire to constantly be pushing myself and answering emails at 3 a.m.? Why is that happening, right? And so without understanding that, you're trying to fix symptoms. And teenagers trying to fix symptoms, that ends up leading them to trying to raise their hand to get some sort of anxiety meds, or they try to use some other method of coping through substance abuse that they can find. But they're fixing the symptoms. They don't actually understand what's causing their anxiety, this fear and uncertainty that's coming in their future, that they just need to address, because they need to get answers around what they need to be doing and how they need to be doing it, and building their own self-confidence to be able to do that. But that's really the key, is making sure that they're fixing the root cause of things, because that's going to then take care of them, instead of them showing up at 50 to Olga's in front of Olga needing support. We've got to start fixing everything at the root. And the
problem that I want to really point out here, that we have the same exact unresolved inner teens stuck in our own neurology, and our decisions are very often coming from the place of a child who didn't get accepted, who was bullied, who didn't grow over these relationships. And so it's not just children experiencing this, it's our own anxiety that sometimes we don't recognize, because we think we are the 45-year-olds and 67-year-olds. But in reality, there is an inner child that could be locked and stuck and running the show, being in the driver of our decisions. And just to move forward a little bit to the decisions, to the strategies, what we think would be very helpful. We have a few minutes left. We really want to look now into the we. And we will send this presentation to you so you can read more details. But we really, really want to kind of get through the concepts that will help us to move forward. So we need to understand that there's a parent's path of success and then there's a teen path of success, and we're all responsible for our own side, not them, us, you yourself. We need to have relationships. Relationships require time and energy. There's an example. You lead by example. No matter what you say, they watch you. That is what is important. Be consistently embedding the confidence, big deal. Confidence is coming from clarity. When you're clear on your values, you know that you can trust your gift. You know the support systems. You can do things. You can risk. You can fall so you can get up. It's important to teach them to look for solutions, not to focus on the problems. So not necessarily problem fixing, but solution finding, which is a very different mindset. And basically be very clear about your emotional state, whether this is good, bad, or in between. It's your system of communication with self that gives you lots of ideas how to move forward in life and decisions.
Absolutely. Well, and on the teen side, it's fairly simple, you know, and I saw somebody put that they want their child to live their authentic life. Well, to live their authentic life, they have to know who they truly are. And right now they're trying to be everything for everybody else and trying to understand where they fit in. And so it's really hard to find your authentic self when you don't understand, like, what does that mean? Why am I being the way that I am? And so it's about really doing that self-reflection, that personal work to understand that. And from there, they can understand their true capability, what power they actually have within them to go out there and make a difference in this world, to make a difference in their lives and other people's lives. And that is what I believe is one of the most important things, is that they're at this transition when they're a teenager, trying to figure out what they're going to do for their life. If they choose to make big decisions about what they're going to be and do in their life from a place of lack of not who they truly are, but who they think they are, and that's everything that they can't be, everything that they can't do, which is most of where all of us focus, they're going to end up at that midlife crisis at 40 years old, because they're going to realize that they've made decisions that are incongruent with the life that they actually want to be able to create. And so it's being able to understand who they truly are, that they're truly capable of being able to create that amazing future that they want for themselves, and then setting those goals for the future and building confidence by actually taking steps toward that and having some support to do that through your relationship or through another mechanism.
And that's how they become resilient. This is how they become confident that they can take risk. Even though they may fail, they will be looking for other solutions. And that is ultimately forever growth, forever resilience, forever possibility. And that's exactly what we want for them, not to create happiness, but create the person who can build his own happiness, fulfillment, decisions, and then course correct if necessary. And so confidence coming in super important. We're not going to be talking about the details. That's where we're doing coaching generally. But I would like you to kind of have a couple components so you can sit down with your journal, give yourself 20 minutes, and see if you have strategies, visions, ideas in each of those components. How you connect. Do you have space? Do you have time? Do you have safe environment for this child or for this person to come to you and connect to you, not to be taught, but just to be, and you listen into them? Do you have a communication strategy? Do you understand how you talk to yourself critically, supportively? That's how you will talk to them. That's how they start talking to themselves. How many of us are going to bombard ourselves with self-talk, which is horrible if you really think of that, right? But that's how we grew up, like, get up, do it, do it, do it. Assertiveness, putting boundaries. Do we know how to get no, not just to say no? Do we have emotional intelligence? What are emotions you feeling? Do you know how to deal with them? And if not, you can look for solutions. You can ask, you can read books, you can get coaches. Resilience. Do you take risks? Do you know how to put effort in, even though it doesn't necessarily get the results that you want? It's growing through doing. It's stress and how we deal with things that are kind of complicated when things don't go our way. How to deal with uncertainty. Do we have the strategy on resilience? Yes or no? And what can you do about this? And big deal is the mindset. Everything that we do, remember that the beliefs, the thinking, the emotions, and the action come from the place how we perceive the world. And if you perceive the world as something friendly that you can, you are right. And if you perceive it as something you can't, guess what? You're right. So we can think differently. If you don't know how, there's always a way to do it. But do take this time and sit down with yourself and have those ideas so you understand what the mirror shows back to you.
And so to conclude this thing, what I would just say is, and I'll read what's on the screen, but only when we as parents feel whole and see our worth fully, can we guide our teams to meet their full potential and achieve their version of happiness and success. And this is what I found with all the teenagers that I've coached, is that the most successful that I could be with a teenager is when that parent is actually doing the same personal growth and personal development, because they are a direct reflection of their parents because of their leadership. And so understanding that is so important. And Olga, that the work that you do is so impactful in being able to shift that team to make sure that they are living their authentic life, that they're living into their happiness, that they're in their confidence, and they're not choosing to play small and settle in any area of their life, because they know what they're truly capable of creating. And I know there's all overachievers on this call, that understanding that you working on yourself is going to be the best thing that is going to allow for your teenager to then be able to live their best life. And obviously working on this is important. And whether that's reading books or seminars or coaching or whatever that is, just make sure that there's a plan on making personal growth, personal development part of your teenager's everyday existence, and part of yours as well. And that is how you're going to get to the richest. Absolutely, that's going to be the richest part of what's going to create the happiness and success that I know that you want for them. And that's my plan for my family. Just so my 6-year-old and 4-year-old, my plan is to get them into coaching young, probably about 10, 11 years old, and make sure that they have that support. Meanwhile, everything that we do all the way to that point, to make sure that they truly understand that is the most important thing, is them growing and developing themselves and living into their confidence.
And there is clarity. Clarity brings confidence. Confidence gives you options to choose different decisions, different actions, different support. And so we really wanted to leave with these 4 pieces that we try to cover today. I is the first place. You always start with I, myself, knowing self, seeing self, understanding self. Them is how you relate to them, understanding them without trying to fix. And then there's a we, and that's where most relationships that come to at least our world are suffering, because we don't put energy, the money, the time, the flow, the gifts into building the we strategically instead of accidentally. And on top of it all, it's leadership, as we talked, leadership now and the future, leadership of them and ourselves. And then the leadership of inspiration and people instead of managing tasks and getting people even to the standards. So with those 4 key components, take your journals, sit down, write it down for yourself, have the plan, have new questions, look for new answers, because asking different questions will always give you different perspective and different answers, and ultimately pivots and shifts. We will be sending this presentation to you so you can go a little deeper through different pieces. You have questions that you want to ask, we will send you our information as well. We also ask you to please fill out the survey in the end, because it's not as much for the program evaluation, but mostly for a way to connect to the questions that you still have. And we Deepak graciously agreed to take a look, and I will take a look as well, and we put together the responses we're going to share with everyone who is registered for this event. And with that, I really appreciate your time and you coming and learning with us. Please do register. We have fantastic events built up pretty much every Wednesday through the end of March. And I really would appreciate and celebrate Deepak, and thank you, Deepak, for coming and sharing your amazing perspective and programs with us. So how can people reach out to you?
Thank you so much, Olga, and it was great to be here with you guys today. If anyone's interested in learning more about what it is that I do working with teens and young adults and supporting them in this critical moment in their life through their transition and into college and into helping them create their extraordinary life, they can reach me on my website. There's a QR code I have on the screen right now that you guys can click onto, or it's just volitionacademy.com that you can reach me there. And I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook. I'm sure you can find me fairly easily there as well. But I'd love to hear from you, and I'm looking forward to answering the questions here. And I'll say this one more time, doing the work that I do and then doing the work that Olga does. That is so complementary. It makes the journey for that teenager, for that child, for that family really the most impactful. And so I want to just impress upon you to just consider doing some personal development and personal growth work, because what I see in the families that I work with, it just changes the entire family dynamic, and it's just such a more energized, amazing, connected place. and the results that then come out of the family from the teenager as well as the adult. It's amazing. And so that's it. And thank you again.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. We look forward to your questions in the questionnaire that was posted, and we will be back with answers to you in the form of writing exercises, so you can definitely connect with us. And look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. We will be talking about confidence and safety, and we'll bring in another amazing expert who is going to be talking about how to create the space for yourself to be always in control of your own emotions and stay safe and confident that you can, because ultimately this is all about, yes, I can, and you can. Thank you very much.